everybody. It's great to be back here again. It's Friday, Parashat Chayah. Just 2 nights ago we had a miracle in Itamar. You heard about the terrible attack on the road here. If you all, those of you that have visited Itamar know the back road that goes out to the Jordan Valley. And a family of a young couple and their child, five-month-old baby, were coming back home. And the terrorists planned, they made a roadblock on one of the, that road winds around, and they made a roadblock on one of the curves. So when a car was coming down, they wouldn't see it, and the car would go into the rocks. And then they would be able to slaughter them from that angle. But what happened was, the family was coming back to Itamar, coming up the road. And the terrorists, when they saw that happen, didn't happen exactly as they planned, but they opened fire on the car, and the mother and the father were both shot. The father still injured, was able to turn the car around, very badly injured, by the way, critically injured, but he was able to get to he couldn't come back up to Itamar because the road was blocked and the terrorists were shooting. So he turned around and drove all the way down to the Gitit area, where he entered the gate of that community below. And from there, a helicopter was brought into the picture, and they were taken to the hospital, and they were saved miraculously. They also found 2 knives at the scene, and apparently it wasn't enough to shoot whoever they wanted to murder and slaughter, but they wanted to use the knives to do other things, additional atrocities. But anyway, this is unfortunately our reality here in Itamar, and of course all of Israel, different parts of the country, and now the threat that we have here in Samaria is different than the threat of rocket, as I've mentioned before in previous updates I've given. But our most dangerous situation is, of course, infiltrations and on our roads around us. Yesterday, I want to share also, I was at a memorial service, if you recall, a month ago. One of our dear residents, Avri Ran and Sharona Ran, their son, O Yosef, was in Tel Aviv. It caught him, the terrible attack on the southern part of Israel on October 7th, and he ran down from Tel Aviv quickly as a quick responder, as his special forces, and he was nearby. Well, Tel Aviv, he still had to get down there. He came down and immediately joined the fighting, and he was killed in battle after saving the lives of 60 families, very cool. And I mentioned this story, and yesterday was his memorial service on Itamar, and we all know, those who have visited the goat farm, is a beautiful farm that the parents set up in the family. Every stone is perfectly aligned, and there's not a piece of garbage on the floor, and everything is so much love there. And they built a beautiful monument in honor of their son who was murdered, who was killed in battle. So, such a special corner, and so many people came to see all those soldiers that came, that although they're all called up now and everyone's in active duty, but to find the pocket of time to pay their respects. It was a very powerful memorial service. And Avri, the father, spoke, and I was so emotionally connected to what he was saying. I mean, it was such a powerful words that just sometimes, words can come out of someone's heart and go nowhere, because they're not really coming out of the heart. They're coming out of just, from what we say in Hebrew, pelachutz, from the mouth, they're leaving the person. But when a person's words come out of their hearts, there's an expression in Hebrew, dvarim hayotzim min halev, nichnasim min halev. When something comes out of the heart, it goes into the heart. And that's really fascinating. I can't explain, emotional experience to hear what he was saying. The message was so important, and to hear from a father who lost a child a month ago. And I'd like to mention a little bit about his message, because I must share it with you. And of course I can't do justice, but I will try my best to somehow to pass over some of the things he said that everyone could relate to, because it's so important to relate to them. It's a very important message. And he began by sharing with us the story of his brother. His brother he has a twin brother, who he met him last week on Hoda Sharon, which is in the coastal area of Israel. And his brother asked him, why is it so much suffering, constant suffering for Israel throughout the generations? And Avri's response to his brother was that there's an expression that and it's an expression in Hebrew. I don't know if it's an English expression. I never heard it really in Hebrew, but it could be. I didn't really try to see if it exists in Hebrew, slogans in English. But in Hebrew it exists, of course, and it's an expression which says that you don't show a fool half of the job. Now what does that mean? It means that you can't judge a situation or criticize a process, why it's going on. You have to wait until it's over. And once it's over, then you can actually see the whole picture, basically. And that was his message he gave to his brother, and what he went on to say when he spoke, and I'd like, of course, to clarify that. He asked his rabbi, he said, regarding this expression, where is that expression in Judaism? How do we find that? We know it's a common expression here in Israel, but where is it brought down in our Torah literature? Is there a source for that expression? And his rabbi answered him, yes, of course. If you look into Psalms 92, and I'll tell you a little bit about that psalm, is it says Mizmor Shel Yom HaShabbat. The psalm we say every Sabbath, every Shabbat, and basically it was the psalm that was recited in the temple when we brought the sacrifice, the offering, the daily offering. And basically it talks about, and I'll just try to quickly read through the psalm a little bit to get to the point that his rabbi wanted to bring down to show where that expression comes from. And it says, Tov lodot l'Hashem, we must always be thankful to God, and ulezamer l'shimcha elyon, right, always to sing to Hashem, lagid b'boker chasdecha, to declare in the morning your love and kindness and your faith in the evenings. And I'm going to go on from there. And then it says in verse 6, it says, Ma gadlu ma'asecha, how great are your deeds, God. Ma'od makum machshvotecha, how deep are your thoughts. And then here's the source of what his rabbi was saying for that expression. It says in verse 7, Ishbar lo yada, someone who is a fool will not know. Ukasir lo yavin etzot. And so, another similar repetition of the expression. Someone who's foolish, who doesn't really see the whole picture, they will not know. And it says in verse 8, B'froch rishaim k'mo esev, vayatzitzu kol polei aven. When we see how the evil, they're blossoming like the grass, and like vayatzitzu kol polei aven, all the evil are giving forth, they're budding, etc. But at the end it says lihisham damadiyah, that they will be destroyed forever. In other words, when people see how evil in this world lifts up its head, and so many terrible tragedies are going on. So if you stop there, you don't see the rest of the picture, but you have to realize that they are right now budding like a flower buds, or like a grass can come out, but what happens, it quickly withers away. But in verse 9 it says, V'ata marom le'olam Hashem, God, you're forever marom, above. Right? God is looking down at the whole picture, the complete picture. And it says in verse 10, Ki hinei oivecha Hashem, ki hinei oivecha yovedo. Your enemies will be lost. Yitpardu kol polei aven, and all those who do evil will just disintegrate. And that's what we have to realize. They will all separate, they will all disappear, those evil makers. This great message, and the psalm continues, talk about how the righteous will blossom like a tamal, like a palm tree, like the cedars of Lebanon. The roots are so deep in the ground that the palm tree, has a strong, bark to it. It stands out, of course. We have to look in this world, and the message that Avri was trying to say, on the first beginning of the message, is we have to look at the whole picture. And then he went on to say something very, very powerful, and I want to continue. And he said something like this. He said, I want you to go back and picture this. He's talking about his son, how his son was alive, a month ago, and he was quickly ran as he responded to the scene, and he was fighting against the enemy. And all of a sudden, he was shot in the head, and trying again, saving lives with his dying breath. At that moment, he described how his son's soul went up to the heavens, and the gates of the heavens opened up. And at that moment, his soul literally met HaKadosh Baruch Hu, met God. He met the everlasting, the Netzach. In this world, he said, is like the way he described it. The world, we're living in a world and we're trying to do whatever we can do here, but it's a dream. It's a passing dream, and it's something that's passing. It's something that, again, is just the middle. It's part of the picture, like only like in the middle of the story. But at the end, when a person's life is over, a person's soul enter the upper worlds, they don't have that clarity to see everything, the whole entire picture totally. And that's really what these righteous, amazing individuals that have given their life at such a young age for saving the life of others, for being a hero of Israel. And when his soul went up to the heavens, the gates opened up to receive him. And that was his the words describing that. And he went on to describe a terrible, terrible, one of the stories in the South when a woman and her 2 children and her husband, the terrorists tortured the husband before the family, before the woman and the children. And terrible, I didn't want to mention the thing that he described what they did. And he said that afterwards they all were up to the heavens and the gates opened up for them as a unit, as a family, to the highest level, to the everlasting, to Kadosh Baruch Hu, to God, the everlasting. The gates opened up for the Olam Haba, for the upper world, and touching upon the everlasting. And that's how he described that we have to open our eyes and realize that in this world, we have to continue. We're going to be struggling and fighting along the way and doing what we have to do. But those special, amazing, righteous individuals, and who live a life of true giving and a true mesiut nefesh, as we say in Hebrew, giving over yourself. And the highest level of giving over, of course, are those that we can't stand on their feet, are those who gave their life for the sake of Israel, right? Who gave their entire lives for the sake of Israel. And those people, we call them Kedoshim, holy, the holies of holies, those are the holies. And these people are again, are entering directly to the gates of the heaven and are touching upon the Netzach. And to hear a father use these words, just a month ago losing a son, but to see it in this light, it has to give strength to all of us. To realize what we're doing here, the mission that we're doing here on this world. And everything we're doing now is for good. Those who fight for good in this world, and fighting against the evil. We can just imagine what the result of all those evils we read about in the Psalm here, what the end result of all those who have perpetrated evil in the world, and where they're going. I'd like from this message, this great message which Avris mentioned, to connect it, of course, to the portion we're reading about Chayah Sarah, the life of Sarah, our matriarch that passes away. And the opening of the portion, which talks about Vayhi Chayah Sarah, right? The whole first section of the portion is about Abraham's getting a burial site for his wife, right? But it opens up Vayhi Chayah Sarah. Right, the life of Sarah, her vital force, her life force, and describing her years, 127 years. And if we pay attention, which is a fascinating point that I want to bring down, that I always came to mind here when I read over and over these first verses, you see something very, very unusual, because it says in verse 2, Vatamot Sarah, right? Sarah passes away in Kiryat Arba in Hebron. And Abraham comes over to make a eulogy, to mourn his wife Sarah, to cry for her. And then in verse 3, it goes on to describe, he doesn't mention Sarah's name anymore. It says, Vayakom Avraham me'al pnei meto. Abraham gets up from his literally means from his dead one, right? Meto. So it's referring to his wife now, but it's referring to in a place from his one who deceased one. And then he's going around and he says, please give me a portion so I could bury my deceased one. Right? He keeps repeating the expression that is his deceased one. He doesn't mention his wife's name anymore. So this came to mind. Why is that the case? Why does it mention? He's telling him he wants to bury Sarah, his wife, mentioning her name. But it's not referring to his wife as Sarah, it's referring to her as his deceased. And again, over and over, if you read the verse, you'll see it over and over again within I didn't count how many times, but many times over in those, from that verse until verse 20. Finally, at the end, his wife is mentioned again when it summarizes it. But what is the point? Why doesn't it mention her name throughout those verses? And I thought the deep meaning behind that is because we have to realize that the soul, and connected to everything we spoke about, what Avri mentioned, the message that Avri gave, is that the soul is everlasting. And that when a person's physical body may leave this world or die, but the soul goes on forever and touches the netzach, touches upon eternity. And that's exactly the message here, is that Abraham came to bury not Sarah. Sarah goes on forever. She didn't die. He's trying to express that she did not die. The only time mentioned Sarah is in the beginning when she's alive, Chayah, with life, because that's her life force, that her life force goes on forever to eternity. And which is fascinating. But then it goes on to talk about the burial, but only mentioning not her name anymore, because she's still alive, her soul is forever. But it's only mentioning the fact that he's burying the deceased, right? So the physical body is being buried, but not the spiritual force, which is going on forever. Which is really fascinating. That happens until the last verse, when it says that Abraham buried Sarah, his wife. That's just summarizing the whole thing. But the message is very clear why it's not mentioned in between, as I mentioned to you before. Now, taking this concept together, if we look in the beautiful words of the Ochaim HaKadosh, one of the great commentaries, and he talks about the fact, a very interesting point he brings out, it says, He Chevron, right? Look over here, if we look at the opening verses of the portion, it talks about how Abraham, came, Sarah passes away in the city of Kiryat Arba in Chevron. By the way, where everyone's spending their Shabbat, a lot of people are going there, as we know the custom to go there. And he's saying, what does the word Chevron mean? And he's trying to explain how that connects to the passing away of Sarah and strengthening and stressing the word Chevron. And he says like this, he says something very, very interesting, very important. He says, Chevron perush hagam shemeta hi, right? Gam shemeta, he goes, the fact that she passed away, she still, he mashpad bechinat hachibur, but she still influences the connection, the chibur. In other words, she might have passed away physically, so it's connected to what I said. It's strengthening what I was trying to mention, is that her body passed away, but her chibur, her connection, in the word Chevron in Hebrew comes from the word meaning chaver, friend, or chibur in Hebrew, to connect. Because the connection, ki hachibur, ki hatzadikim gam sheyamutu, haguf eino mushlal machayim. Unbelievable. Literally, I found this gem after I thought of my idea. I see it so clearly strengthened by our great sages, is the fact when righteous people pass away, although they pass away, but they don't lack life. Why? Because the righteous in their death are called life, and that's what we see. Chayah Sarah, in her life force goes on forever. And that's exactly what we stressed over here, and I want to bring it back to what we were talking about in the beginning with Avri and his son, when he's eulogizing his son, is that someone like O Yosef, his name means literally the light of Joseph. I mean, his light, his neshama is the gates opened up in heaven. He's connected to the netzach, to eternity. And no evil, terrorist, animal, subhuman from Gaza could take that away from him. His physical body passed away, and we have that remnant that's buried on the hill here of Itamar, and we'll remember him by standing there to connect with him. But of course his soul is all the way up there in the highest realm, together with all those righteous individuals who gave their life for the sake of their people, to fight for what's right, for righteousness. And that's the lesson here. When you struggled for our survival, and of course every day we're dealing with many, many challenging issues here in the land, but we have to stick to our goals, to stick to our aim, to see the whole picture, not to stop in between. We're working towards something very beautiful here in the land, and Israel is a light to the nations. And the people of Israel have suffered so much. But we suffered on behalf of mankind, to show the world that there's a light in this world, that there's an eternity, that there's a God in the world, that we all have to connect to. And that by doing good and by being on the proper side, the light will take over the darkness. And that's exactly the whole message of what Avri spoke about, of this week's portion, opening up with the Chayah Sarah, that the righteous are always alive, and nothing will be able to stop this. Nothing will be able to change this reality, no matter what they try to do the evil. And we overcome all this terrible evil, and we will see the beautiful light, God willing, in the land shine again very soon. Shabbat Shalom, Besorot Tovot, Yeshuot v'Nechamot.